Hello, this is Shannon with Vinyl Cuts, and today in this video I'm going to be walking you through a totally basic vinyl how-to project. So for this project you're only going to need three simple things: any color of vinyl of your choice, a transfer paper, and then anything that you'd want to apply it to. I'm choosing this magazine float frame right here, but you could choose any sort of plate, mirror, whatever you're choosing. So let's just get our files together and let's get started. Okay, so now that we have our files, the first thing that I like to do is I like to go around, and a lot of people, it's kind of depending on your preference, so a lot of people will like to go and make a cut box in their file, or you could just go ahead and take a little handy X-Acto knife and go in and cut a box around the design itself. It helps with the weeding process. Really, ultimately what you want to do is be able to get these pieces off as quick and painlessly as possible, and try to make sure that all the vinyl does not stick on top of each other. Otherwise you're going to have a huge mess on your hands, and it's going to make it a lot more difficult than what it needs to be. I went ahead and I chose from our store the Home Sweet Home file, and since this one is it has a little more flair and curves and twirls to it, I like to really just get into all of, like, you can't really probably see it on the camera too well, but I like to get into like all the little nooks and crannies in it, just to make sure that, you know, the pieces that I pull up are going to come up easily and I'm not taking the design with me. So right now I'm just getting around the first word right here. I'm going to go in and just get into all of the little nooks and crannies and try not to cut the design, just to make sure that these pieces are going to pull up nice and easy for me. So I've got the word home pretty much cut out, so I'm just going to go through and slowly lift up the pieces. Obviously, if I feel like it's not going to pull off well, I'm not going to go and force it. I'm going to go ahead and take my my X-Acto knife, like right here, it's getting close to like a curve, so I'm going to go through and maybe slice it off a little bit so I'm not pulling up my design. There we go. That's good. This process, definitely feel free to take your time. If any of the little design comes up, I like to have my little pick-me-up on hand to hold down the piece as I'm pulling up, just to make sure I get everything to stay where I need it to. Bundle up all the excess up at the top. For my process, I like to go in and just isolate word by word what I'm working with. So this is essentially what the entire design is going to look like at the end. You're basically isolating your design from the rest of the vinyl onto the sheet that you had initially cut. So I'm just going to go ahead and finish this up, and then we'll go through the next step together. So this is basically what the design should look like once you're all done with your weeding process. You're taking away all the excess vinyl and leaving just your design on the sheet that you had cut. From here, what you're going to want to do is take out your transfer paper. I like to use just basic transfer paper for simple vinyl projects, but there's also a transparent transfer tape that is really, really useful as far as like apparel designs and whatever, but we'll get into that later. So basically, the transfer paper works as a bridge to take your design to the product that you're working on, the piece that you're working on. And it just keeps all of the pieces in the exact position where you need them to be. So I'm just gonna go ahead and kind of lay the paper out on top of my design, and I'm gonna wanna cut along this line right here. The cool thing about transfer paper is that it's also reusable. So, okay, I've got my line. I can move this off to the side real quick. So the side that you're gonna wanna work with is this little checkerboard side right here. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove it from its backing. okay? And again, just to keep the alignment as perfect as possible, what I'm going to do is just kind of pull from both corners and align it with the very bottom edge of my transfer paper. Put it on here, and just to make sure that the design sticks as perfectly as possible to the transfer paper, you could take like a credit card, a driver's license, a little silhouette scrapey thingy, and just really just go over it a bunch of times. All you have left to do is just pull it off, and the design should come with the transfer paper. Be very, very cautious to make sure that the vinyl does not lay back onto each other. Otherwise, you're going to have a little problem. Awesome. Perfect. Make sure if you're working with any sort of glass that you're Windexing it and making sure that it's as clean as possible. No fingerprints, no dirt or anything. It just helps the vinyl stick better to your piece. And I'm going to go in, stretch it out, make sure corner to corner, line it up with the edge of my glass as best as possible. Beautiful. And then I'm just going to slowly, very slowly lay it down. Try your best to avoid any bubbles or weirdness. Okay. So I'm just going to go ahead and flatten it all out, make sure it sticks to it. And then all you got to do is just lift it off. If any of the pieces do come up with it, I mean, go ahead, lay down the transfer paper, push down a little bit harder, make sure the vinyl sticks. Get your little silhouette tool to make sure it stays. So now that you have transferred your design over to the glass, it's the fun part. Finally see what it looks like all put together. So I'm going to take the frame that I'm working with, and this is considered a floating frame because the design is floating in the middle, which I guess should be common sense, right? There we go. You probably don't have to put that in there. So I'm just going to go ahead and drop the glass into the frame very carefully. We don't want to break it. Then I'm going to put the backing in. Close these up really quick. And flip it. And this is our final piece.